Yo, this is Stuff coming to you 2020 with the racism talk. Alright, well, for the last couple weeks, we've been going at it with the riots, the police, all this shit in the streets, whatever, right? Alright, the biggest problem is with Americans is the culture that we represent. It's black people, Spanish people, Chinese people, white people, Indian people. What everybody fails to realize is segregation and civil rights was fought by the African American culture in America. We weren't brung here on our own merit like indentured servants when the Britons came over. And throughout the last 200 years, we've been tortured in a form of slavery that's been called oppressing, held down in shackles. My grandfather, my grandmother, they all had to suffer and be tortured for other races to live in this country, for them not to be persecuted over civil rights or other issues. There's something called the Willie Lynch letter. Everybody should read it, especially the Latin Chicano community, because any real Latin or Spanish person, and I don't say this biasly because I have a daughter that's Latin, my wife is Latin, my stepdaughter is Latin, I have a whole family that has Mexican and Spanish people and Southern American people all throughout it. But what everybody needs to know in America, especially Mexicans, is that your foundation was built off of an African American sacrifice. Basically, we wouldn't even be African American unless we were brung over here and put in the position that we were put in, and it was unwilling. There's been all these civil rights activists and everything that's been done with America over the last 300 years to build what we have today. And there's been plenty of prestigious people throughout history that are black that have never been given credit for what they've actually done. And now in this day and age, people want to talk about the Matrix, dogma, and semantics, mostly in the community of diversity, you know what I mean? So when it comes to Spanish people and Chinese people and Indian people, they will never understand the actual oppression and misery and torture that my ancestors had to go through so they can have a way to be in this country. We live in 2020 and there's been police brutality created and continued for the last 200 years. I haven't even, to be real with you, there was no such thing as Spanish people or Mexican people before the 60s and 70s in the United States. We didn't see too many of them. There wasn't a lot of them. So at this point, I'm asking myself, where do other cultures pay their respect to the African American community within America? Now, I know we have a lot of shit that we've gone through, and that's why I've said that I've mentioned the Willie Lynch letter, because there's house niggas and there's field niggas, you know what I mean? Light skin and dark skin. Fortunately, I was blessed to be light-skinned, so I wasn't persecuted as much as my dad, who's dark as concrete, you feel me, dark as asphalt, you know, and I've seen my mom and my dad go at it all my life. She's white, he's black, and I have one side of my family that's full of rednecks, and the other side is full of, you know, strong, empowered black people. My grandfather was the president of the NAACP for almost a decade. He was the first black man to actually introduce the Juneteenth Senate bill to the U.S. for an African American holiday. And for most of you guys who don't know, the Juneteenth was the celebration of the Emancipation Proclamation that Abraham Lincoln signed for the slaves to be free. All of these things every American should know. You know what I'm saying? And for whoever's out there thinking that black people oppressed themselves, they sold themselves into slavery, there's been slavery since the beginning of time. It was never considered a bad thing until people started being oppressed and tortured, which started with African Americans building the United States, because there was only one race strong enough to actually build the country quick enough for them to have what they wanted out of it. Chinese people were too little. They couldn't even build the railroads. You feel me? The Mexican people weren't even here. They were being conquered by the Spanish, and the Mayans wiped all of them out with disease and famine. At the end of the day, when you look at our country as the United States, we're a smorgasbord of all types of races. But nobody would have the right to walk down the street without being hurt or judged or harassed unless it was for the black people sacrifice who built this country. So I suggest everybody to understand this, you feel me? There would be no black cops. You wouldn't be able to go to school with other minority races. You wouldn't be able to vote. You wouldn't be able to do anything that you think you have a right or call freedom in the United States. It really hurts my heart when people come out and say, oh, you're in the Matrix. No, the Matrix is you believing that Jesus was blonde hair, white with blue eyes. And most of the African American community, all in the South, believes the same thing. You know what I'm saying? Because of 100 years of culture and being oppressed and making somebody believe something that was never real. I mean, if you want to talk about dogma and semantics, keep that on a religious level, or better yet, a personal level, because at the end of the day, it's just your opinion. The facts are, my ancestors suffered for this country. And everybody should be thankful for what my family and other people's family had to go through to create a way for them. I guess that's racism, 2020. But if you want to talk about the Matrix, look up Ray Kurzweil. You know what I'm saying? Look up the singularity about 2020 and how technology will take over our entire race as human beings, instead of over here arguing with people about 300 years ago when black people sold themselves into indentured servitude and saying that they sold themselves into American slavery. Like, you know how ambiguous that is? You know how manipulative that is? And then for you not to be black and come from that position, I respect most Latins, most Spanish people. I love their culture, and I think that they wouldn't have an American culture unless it was for African American culture. So, for our Latinos out there and the African American community, I think we should really come together, and everybody should put down their differences and stop trying to represent black or brown, and just let yourself know that there's blue and there's no blue. Police don't give a fuck. If you ain't white and you don't wear the color blue, they're gonna put you on the ground, fuck with you, harass you, fuck you up. I've been in the position 1,000 times, and if you want to see the footage, I can show you that too. You feel me? And I'm just talking from a real person's perspective. Like I said, I can't be racist, and I don't feel like I am, because I'm both races that built this country. My mom is whiter than white, and my daddy's blacker than black. I've seen my mom go off on my dad about a fucking speeding ticket because the police wanted to pull him over because he was black. You know what I'm saying? This shit has happened to me all my life. You know what I'm saying? My family has been murdered in the streets. So, for people talking that shit, like, you can come from the perspective of being a libertarian or being conservative, but at the end of the day, if you don't have $1 million+ and you don't make an entire ridiculous revenue and you're not a tycoon, you can't really speak to the masses as if you're better or if you come from a different place, especially when you're riding on the coattails of African Americans.